Hello, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Zafar Imran and this is my co-host Ghosh Shahzad Beg.
Hello.
And welcome to the first ever episode of the Photon Exchange. It's an honor to have with us Mr. Abubakar Sial, who is an aerospace engineer from Purdue and the founder of OctiLearn. Sir, could you tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, so I did my A level in Pakistan. I was taking science subjects and then went to Purdue to do my undergrad in aerospace engineering. And the idea actually was to stay back in the US and go into R&D. But I came back to Pakistan, and that was around 2014. So when I came back, I joined the education sector. And then I've spent about 10 years now. So doing a wide range of things, teaching physics, leading STEM departments, helping students with college admission essays, applications, building profiles, and most importantly, personal development. For example, how to develop or the importance of developing communication skills. Because you'll see a lot of students who have grades, but written ability and speaking ability, those are not as strong as they can be for a very large number of people. So I've always been interested in holistic development, sharing my experiences with students and tell them how they can position themselves better to basically achieve, more in life. Because I think when I went through the journey, for example, I applied to Purdue, there's no such thing as counseling firms. Maybe there was one or two, but we didn't know of any. That was back in 2008. So I had to do the whole process myself. I didn't have an advisor or any counselor working with me. So whether it was the essay application, profile building, all of it had to be done independently. And then of late, a couple of years ago, I founded an edtech startup. It's called OctiLearn. We're going to personalize and adaptive education. And to put it plainly, if you look at the traditional model of education, students are required to adapt to the curriculum. I was interested in flipping that, in having a model that adapts to the student so that it's personalized and adaptive, meaning that every component of it adapts to your strengths and weaknesses, because that will have a significant impact on the efficiency of learning and also the outcomes for each student. And that's what I'm working on these days.
So you mentioned OctiLearn and you mentioned a lot of your works were in STEM education. So have you always been passionate about STEM? शुरू से बचपन से ही था, or was it something you developed later?
No, I think it was pretty clear. Usle, I'll say I have an easy case because for as long as I can remember, I really liked math. So, for example, to give you some context, O-level add math, when we were taking that, I was a fanatic when it came to math and a bit of a perfectionist, which is not always a good thing because it can really slow you down. I can talk about that later. Anyway, so the add math book is a thick one, right? Every student taking
Yes.
it knows that. So I thought, okay, I want to solve all of these problems. So I went from cover to cover and I would number the pages on the register. So I still remember it was 5,000 pages. So I basically did every problem in the book. So math was always a thing. And, then naturally physics was always of a lot of interest to me as well. Maybe I think it's because it's the most relatable science. It's the easiest one to observe. So yeah, I think my interest in STEM was at least since grade 9 when O-level started. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted something to do in STEM.
So when you went to Purdue, out of all the engineerings, and you said you were interested in math as well, so mathematician would be a good bachelor's to do as well,
Yeah.
bachelor in math. But why aerospace engineering? Why not mechanical or physics to become a theoretical physicist?
That's a good question. Actually, math was an option. I used to consider actuarial science, which at that time was pretty new. And I think the unemployment rate in the US at the time was 0% because the demand was great. You're dealing with probabilities, predicting outcomes. A lot of financial assessment comes into play as well. So that's one discipline I wanted. But I think the aspect of engineering of building stuff, and then the fact that a plane flies, I don't know, there's some fascination linked to that. Mechanical engineers can also work in aerospace, but at the time, I didn't know so much. It was just the aspect of one that the plane flies. There's a different feel to it, and the other in terms of how fluids work. Like aerodynamics or fluid mechanics specifically. That is what I was really interested in. I wanted to basically go into computational fluid dynamics. If you look at Formula One cars, it's a big component of designing an F1 car. Those kind of job roles were really fascinating to me. So mechanical engineering, I think, was maybe a little too popular. So I was like, I should do something else. So yeah,
As someone who
mostly that.
wants to do mechanical engineering in the future, I'm kind of rethinking my career choices now.
No, I wouldn't recommend that. I actually think for anybody who's not a U.S. citizen, you're better off doing mechanical engineering because you'll open your options.
Okay.
There are a lot of industries you can go into, whether that's aerospace or anything else.
You mentioned you worked as a counselor, right? And you help kids write their college essays and stuff, and you want to do that. So that's interesting to me because obviously both of us are gonna apply for colleges and university, and we're gonna have to write our essays. And I'm sure many people in our audiences will someday write their essays. So if you
Yeah.
have any tips or tricks, or like what the universities are looking for that you want to share with everyone, that'd be appreciated.
Yeah, so a couple key things. One is that try to maintain a competitive edge. And what that means is that you should try to keep it unique. Now, what basically happens is that perhaps you can relate. A lot of people are trying to fit the mold in the sense they think, okay, this is a template. Let's follow the template and it will work. But if you look at all the set of variables in your life, for example, where were you born, who your parents are, what do they do, what's your socioeconomic background, what's your ethnic background, what are your views on, what's your worldview of people around you. So you grow up with a certain environment and conditions. If you consider all of those, you are actually unique. When they say you're unique, people I think at times don't understand what that means. The reason why you're unique, because if you look at, again, how many siblings you have, where you were born, all of the factors I was talking about, and put those together in a single set, there's no other human being with that exact same set. What that means is that if you go do some introspection, but again, you have to be thoughtful about it. So over time, if you've been observing things around you, you will have a certain take on them.
That's a very interesting perspective. I don't think I've ever heard that from anyone else before.
So I do think that, but for a lot of people, I believe the college admissions process forces you to find a passion or to have something that you're interested in. You're better than in compared to other people which are around you in the same group, age group, right? What I think is that it's too early to force a person in that scenario. I think many people throughout their lives, even when it's ended, do not find their passion. Because finding a passion is not, I don't think it's as easy as just absorbing or like observing the environment. I think there are more aspects to it, and we can't expect.
Basically, what I mean by observation is that just how the world operates. When you have observation about things, you develop your own view. So the point I was trying to make is that don't borrow views. For example, somebody's teaching you, right? Whatever they instruct you or whatever they teach you, you typically tend to take that as is. You have to have a critical mind, which means you evaluate things on your own. And in terms of uniqueness, you bring to the table what you think you have to offer to the world, because everybody does have something to offer to the world. Now, at times people are sleepwalking through life. What it means is that you're very passive. You're not very thoughtful. You don't investigate things. You're not a curious individual. When you're not curious, you will never be able to develop depth in things. You'll only develop depth if you've ever investigated or thought about things. Why is this like this? Why is that like that? Right? And then when you, for example, write a Common App essay, some specific things, for example, when you open the first paragraph you write, I think it's very important to captivate the reader in the first paragraph. And that's actually not easy to do. One way to test that is if you've written the intro paragraph, just don't write anything else. Make a few people read it and ask them how interested would they be in reading the rest of the essay if they only read the first paragraph. That will, step one, tell you how strong of an opening your essay has, which is a big point. Because you can imagine if I have to read 100 essays and I open a generic, boring intro of like, I've already lost half my interest there, but I'm just going to read it. I'm not really enthusiastic about it. But if I come across an essay where the first paragraph is very, has a lot of impact and really catches my attention, then I'm naturally curious. What's the rest of the story? So it's like when you shoot a trailer for a movie. What's the goal? You want to captivate the audience, leave them hanging.
To watch
where they're
the
like,
movie.
we're waiting. That is exactly the same logic. Writing an essay is about storytelling techniques. You have to be a good storyteller. That will make a big difference. Because you have to remember at the end of the day, the people who are evaluating your essays are also people. And they make a lot of decisions based on emotion, even unconsciously. So, if you can appeal to their emotion, or just get them involved like that, where they feel passionately about what they're reading, it will work well in your favor.
That's a great take on that. So, how important do you think is the bachelor's degree to anyone in this field? Because you have all these techniques, AI, we have all these websites we can learn from, and a lot of people are promoting that education is not as important, or a bachelor's is not as important as it used to be. Do you have similar thoughts or not?
I think one thing I've observed is that there's a lot of generic advice on the internet. This is actually a great question. It's directly linked to that. For example, you'll see somebody saying, "Oh, do e-commerce, do drop shipping, do this, do that," and you're just running wherever the herd is going. Now, this is again what I was talking about: if developing depth. If you're always following the herd, what does that mean? It's a clear indication that you don't really have a unique insight on anything. Because if you do, or if you did, then you'd be interested in pursuing that. Now, if you say bachelor's degree is not important, I think it's important for you to understand the developed world versus the developing world. Pakistan is a different ballgame. Now, something like this might still work, let's say in the US, where in terms of labor and making income without a degree, options are still there. But I think for all practical purposes, somebody who's living in Pakistan is too dangerous of a game to play if you don't want to go for a bachelor's degree. I wouldn't recommend that. Even if you're in the US, to be honest, I am pro university degrees, I think, at least as of now, because when I went to Purdue, I know it was a great learning experience for me. And I can tell you, because US colleges have that environment, they're very dynamic. There's a lot for you to see. Everything's on a large scale. There's great R&D going on, cutting edge research. Every good university has that. If you are good at absorbing information, acquiring knowledge, that it will really serve you well. Because if you do graduate, you're still free to do whatever you want. Even as a student, you can pursue something on the side, and then as soon as you graduate, you can just ramp it up. So I think not or opting out of it is a little too extreme, and it's a risky one to do. For example, let's say if you're not very strong financially, where you're managing, you have a decent life, but it's not like you have tons and tons of resources, and you don't have a degree. Let's say a startup. There are a lot of myths around startups. There's a lot of glamour, but behind the scenes, it's probably one of the hardest things to do in life. Very uncertain, high risk, high reward. If it doesn't work, all the time, energy, money you put into it is going to go. You have to be okay with accepting that. Now, if you are along those lines, you say, I want to do a startup, I'm a dropout, because again, it's so cool, dropout from here is killed it with a startup. And it doesn't work. Then the thing is, where do you stand? Because it may not work. It's happened to so many people. So I just think it's too extreme. It's a very risky approach to take. It's better to go for the degree, because you see, another point, when you're at university, you don't have the pressure of generating an income. It's probably one of the best times in your life to learn about anything under the sun. You can really change yourself in that 4-year period. You can acquire tons of knowledge if you want to, if you're that kind of person. And you're in a much better position to pursue things, because you've learned them out of passion, not out of need. There's a big difference between the two. When you're working for money, it's different. Some people, when they keep saying passionate, but anything that you really want to work on yourself, and that happens to also generate an income, you'll usually go much further in that line of work. You see, because it's intrinsic, there's a driving factor there. So I really don't think unless somebody has a very strong, compelling reason to not go to university. I have never recommended that, and I just don't think there's a need. For example, can you think of any case where it's a bad idea to go to university?
So I totally agree with you. I just wanted to know
Yeah.
your thoughts. And when people say Okay, Bill Gates dropped out of university, and Mark Zuckerberg did too, but they dropped out of Harvard and Stanford or Elon Musk as well. Not some extra university.
And those
in Pakistan.
examples are like the 3 that succeeded out of the
Exactly.
100 that failed.
Out of the Joes
This
and
is
the
a great
Bens.
point. You have to keep statistics in mind. And, for example, I can tell you, when people are struggling, this is a fact of life, or you're working hard at something, maybe not being able to get a result, 99% of the people are not going to back you, right? Arshad Nadeem is a typical story, and quite an exceptional case. But you can imagine, just a year ago, who was talking about it? I think absolutely no one. And now they
Everyone.
all want to mention him,
Favorite.
right?
Take the
Because he's made it now. So people have the problem is that people are not actually usually curious. Why? If you ask somebody, have they ever read Bill Gates' life? Most people have not, right? What do they know? He was a dropout and he made it. It's false correlation. Now, back in the day, I don't remember the exact details, but he had access to a computer through some network that he had or through a referral
Yeah, exactly.
where nobody else, I think he was one of, or a handful of people in the whole world
I
who
think
had
he was,
access to a
he was
computer.
the only one in the state to have an access
Yes.
to a computer.
You see, that is huge. Now, that's really a competitive edge he had, a big time over everybody else. And then he was a smart person as well. So he really put in the time and he was able to get something out of it. Now, the problem is that people are not, it's hard to evaluate yourself honestly. That do you really have that persistence to go, against the wind and continue pushing when you don't see anything? Many people don't. But because the glamour is associated with it, that, oh, if I make it. But they're assuming a positive outcome. They're assuming, it's going to be the same if they do it. But yeah, that dropout story again, unless there's a very compelling reason, I don't know. I don't think one needs to do it. Because the point is that you can still do everything else. I think it's just glamorized excessively. With a university degree, there's nothing that you cannot do, either while you're at university or after graduating. So why not just do it? And then learn from everybody else around you as well in those 4 years.
I think before we continue with our questions, we should introduce our first segment. So we want the audience to know our guest and who he is, and a fun way we've devised for that is a game called Two Truths and One Lie.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the game?
Yeah, been a while since I heard of it, but
It's pretty self-explanatory. It's you have
yeah,
to
you
tell
three statements.
yeah, 3 statements. 2 of them have to be truths and 1 have to be a lie, and we'll try to guess which one is the lie.
Oh, I'm really not good at this. Okay.
Take your time. There's no hurry.
So I give you 3 statements.
Yes.
My father was born in Kenya. That's 1.
True.
I'm a great artist. That's 2. And I'm not a good writer. That's 3.
I definitely
Has to
think
be
he's
a good writer.
Because
Okay.
he has to be a good writer. I
Counselor,
think
yes,
his father might be born in Kenya because that's just so out of this world.
Yeah, how would you have thought of that?
You're a great artist is a lie.
Sorry?
The fact that you're a great artist is a
It's a
lie.
lie.
Yeah, that is it.
Should we do
Because I'm
another
a
one?
terrible writer. Yeah, maybe I should think longer and, make it more challenging.
So, more about your father being born in Kenya. Where was your mother from or born in?
So by ethnicity, we're Pakistani. I mean, you can clearly tell. But my grandfather was born in Kenya. So great-grandfather obviously must have been in Kenya for grandfather to be born there. So it goes back a really long way. They had a business in metal fabrication. And then my dad was born there, all his siblings as well. So, spent most of his time in Kenya.
Have you ever been to Kenya?
Yeah. I used to live there and then moved here when I was 7. So I've spent most of my life in Pakistan. But I'm still a Kenyan citizen.
That's the one
A
of
lot
the
of my
most,
cousins are fluent in Swahili, which is the local language
that's
there.
one of the most strongest passports of the entire world. The Kenyan passport,
No way.
the greatest one.
Well, you know what? Unfortunately, it's true, but
It's probably above
it ranks
Pakistan.
about 50 spots above Pakistan, yeah.
It probably is.
But I
This
mean,
is wild.
issues are similar. They're kind of like siblings, Pakistan and Kenya. Most of the
That
issues are
goes for a
common.
lot of countries in Pakistan.
Yeah, you see, because developing countries are generally sister countries. because fundamental issues are almost identical, with just different faces.
You have 3 more statements to tell us. You came up with those 3 statements very nice. Me and Zephyr tried to do this game beforehand. We just couldn't think of any statements. We were like, "Acha, hum bhi kar denge."
So I have 4 siblings. I got lost once when I was young,
That's true too.
and I wanted to pursue neuroscience.
I think with the last statement, he's trying to give it away, give the impression that I'm thinking and this is.
And he just said he what he wanted to pursue, and he never mentioned neuroscience. Did he?
He did not. Lekin, I do think the first one might be that because he did mention his father. He didn't mention his siblings.
But dekho, his interest has been in maths. He wanted to pursue engineering. Neuroscience, I think.
That's the outline. Huh? That's the wow. ये भी truth है.
Yeah, probably.
I think siblings.
First one, probably.
Siblings.
Yeah.
This
This is annoying. I thought I had you because neuroscience it was true.
So why neuroscience?
I think I probably read. I generally like to read books, and most of them are nonfiction. So when you look at how the brain works and all of the research linked to it, and again look at neuroscience specifically, it's a very fascinating world. It's a complete world within the larger world, and people still don't understand a lot of aspects of how the brain works. And then with how thoughts are linked to one another, or when, for example, there's a phrase that says neurons that fire together, wire together, or the other way around. Basically, the point is that when you're thinking about A and then closely associating B with it, then the neuronal mapping, I think, tends to change. So just a lot of things like that where I thought it's a mysterious world. I think that's what. And in terms of science and doing research, it's naturally a great domain because there's a lot that's yet to be discovered.
So you mentioned earlier that you had the fun in building things, and that's why you found engineering so appealing. Given that neuroscience is mostly theoretical, why do you think itna difference?
To be honest, it wasn't building actually that was the key driver. It was the idea of something that was challenging and required a good amount of intellectual capacity or mental or cognitive aptitude to do well, and then for something to be a good field for research in the science domain. So when I used to think about neuroscience, then you see if you look at math, or whether it's aerospace engineering, so all engineering disciplines were generally of interest. I attended a seminar once where they were talking about civil engineering, but that was just kind of boring for me because all the buildings I observed in Pakistan, there's nothing exciting, even to this day. If I were to go into civil engineering, I'd want to work on structures that are complicated, kind of like twisting and then just bending.
Defying the laws of
because
physics.
Again, you see, those are engineeringly is not a word, but I mean, from an engineering perspective, they're hard to design, right? So I think generally it's about something being, again, having a decent requirement for cognitive aptitude. I guess that's like the most general way for me to put it in terms of all the things I found interested. If you look at psychology or even philosophy, I took a few psychology courses in undergrad. You're required to do that. And then when you look at psychology, it's very interesting. Or why? Because let's take marketing, right? Really important for any company. If you look at how marketing is done, the underlying component all deals with human psychology. Why? Because you have to have an impact on human behavior, and that's linked to psychology. So that also is of a lot of interest to me. So I think it's hard to pin it down. There are multiple things that I'm interested in. And then writing. That has not much to do with engineering, except that obviously engineering has technical writing. But I used to write a journal every now and then write a few quotes. I actually have a page on Instagram where I've put those out. Students really liked it. But I don't know how that became a thing. but it is quite a powerful thing. If you've ever done journaling, or if you do it, you'll see that you'll never be able to process your thoughts the way you can if you write them down. But again, if you look at our culture, it's not something that a lot of people do. It's very uncommon.
It's like the saying that the brain is made to think, not to store down things. And
Yeah.
to store down things is to write them.
Yeah.
So that's a different aspect. So this is very interesting for me too. Because I think the fact that psychology and philosophy along with science should be integrated more. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, you have engineering degrees and you have science degrees, but you cannot take, like, for example, a philosophy ka psychology ka course with it. And I attended a talk which targeted this aspect. Like abroad universities may, even if you're a scientific major or even if you're an engineering major, you can always take a psychology or arts ka course
Yeah.
to involve
Can
yourself
you
in
just
it.
please put sugar in it?
Do you think that the integration of STEM and arts is important, especially considering, like, in the Renaissance period and then the golden era of the Muslims, most of the people who were scientists were also artists and philosophers.
Well, one, I'm impressed by the nature of questions, to be honest. I really like them, and you're hitting some great points, honestly. So this is another brilliant point. I am mostly in favor of the U.S. college structure. I would take that any day over how they do it in the UK. Some key differences. The UK has a 3-year degree, right? And then from year 1, you go into the program that you want to pursue, whatever degree you're doing. But in the US, it's 4 years. And then you have to do general education courses, the gen ed electives
Yes.
that you have, about 6 on average, but you're free to take more. Now, the cool thing I like about that is that you could be a mechanical engineering student. You say, I want to do a minor in philosophy, but then I want to do another minor. Or maybe I want to do 2 minors and then take one other course that I like about something else. You're free to do all of that. That flexibility is amazing. Why? Because I really think it goes hand in hand with increasing the curiosity of people. Because if you have even reasonable amount of interest in something, and you can take a course from somebody who's highly accomplished, perhaps you're more likely to learn more about it. If you, for example, go to the UK, you're a mechanical engineering student, year 1, year 2, year 3, all you know about is engineering. And I don't really like that. If you look at, again, aerospace engineering or systems engineering, now you have structures, that's one domain. You have propulsion, that's another domain. You have aerodynamics, that's another domain. You have avionics. All of these things have to come together as a whole for it to work really well. If you look at a human being, physically, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, if they're sound in these domains, their output is going to be much greater. Again, the system has to come together as a whole. Meaning that if there's more breadth, I think you're a better thinker. You can generally assess things better as well because that variation will come into play. Somebody who only knows about a single domain. So I think it's a bit like saying that if you're an expert in one domain, but you have good knowledge of a lot of other domains, I think it's a huge edge to have instead of just being great at one. If you are great at one, obviously, there are good chances you'll do well in that line of work, but that's still ordinary.
So
If you want to do something special, you'll have to think a little creatively, right? Otherwise, you'll not work on something that's exciting.
Would you say it's better to be a jack of all trades and master of none, or just be a master of the one field you're pursuing?
Well, I guess there are different schools of thought. I do think there should be a core expertise area that you have. For example, if I mention the startup, you can ask any person who's done a startup. Early stage founders have to be jacks of all trades. Why? Because this team is very small. They have to be involved in every step of the process, whether that's product, that's operations, that's marketing, that's content, whatever they're doing. Like if we're doing EdTech, for example, I've been involved in every single domain. And now I'm not somebody who's an expert in marketing, but I do understand it well enough to execute certain things. So I don't have a choice. If any founder delegates work too early, there are very high chances the startup is never going to work. Now you have to be a jack of all trades. As you grow, for example, you're at the pre-seed stage or the seed stage, you go to Series A. That's in simple words, you're generating revenue, the company's larger, you have maybe 20, 30 people working. Now, as you grow, you'll have to gradually move further and further away from the domains and let somebody else take the reign. So then you sort of, even if you look at yourself as a CEO in the company, you again need to know a lot about different domains. But as a core skill, for example, if I were to do a fintech startup, I don't think I would have done it because I don't have any unique insight where I'm like, okay, this is a problem. Being in education and seeing all different angles of it, there's a competitive edge I had in the sense that I observed how students were learning, how do schools work, what's the model they follow, and what are the shortcomings, how can I tackle that? In terms of if somebody is a jack of all trades, the problem is, what are you going to sell yourself on? So I think personally, I think it's not a very strong scenario for somebody to be a jack of all trades. But if you're a jack of all trades, but there's one domain that you're really good at, I think that's a stronger combination you can offer to companies or people.
So you said that like you should have the startup you're starting. You should have a core principle, and that's something like a lot about in the field. So then, why did you choose OctiLearn when I think that's more software oriented and more like AI generative based? And instead, why didn't you go towards engineering or like aerospace or anything that
Well, you see, my background, like educationally, was in aerospace engineering, but I did not work in the aerospace engineering sector. I worked in the education sector. So as far as the working principles go, I had observed the education sector from really close. And the whole idea of making learning more efficient was something I was really interested in. Meaning, you see people doing past exams and doing question after question. So I was thinking, well, if we could make questions adapt to you based on what you're struggling with, wouldn't that help you do it 10 times quicker? It would. So it wasn't engineering because I didn't work in the engineering sector. So it's not a software-based startup. It brings in a software component to education.
I think this goes very well with what you said earlier, that you can go into university to do anything, but it doesn't dictate what you do later on in life.
True.
Absolutely. There's this huge misconception. I think maybe it's the case more so in Pakistan because traditionally, anybody, whatever degree they do, you see the same line of work. It's pretty linear like that. Now, if you look at the US, for example, you'll have a lot of people who do engineering degrees and end up in the finance sector. Why? Because they're good at critical thinking, they can critically evaluate things, and then they're strong problem solvers. They're good at doing analysis and evaluation. So if they take those skills over to the finance domain, they're very valuable assets for any company. So it's very common to have engineering people then pursue an MBA. It's one of the most sought after combinations, because of the skill set that engineering gives you. And then when you take that into the business world, you have a critical mind and you're trying to objectively evaluate everything instead of bringing in, not being very emotionally engaged with it, but just looking at it, observing, critically again, evaluating things. So yeah, you really don't have to worry about that. If your undergrad degree, I think generally must be at least a domain you're interested in. Otherwise, it's pretty much a piece of paper. And I can tell you for a fact, I've seen people who have PhDs. Unfortunately, those were local PhDs. But if you see them, in terms of the writing quality, you're amazed as to how it's possible for somebody with a PhD background to write like that at such a, you can say, basic level. Now, a lot of people will, for example, say, our parents want us to do X or Y. Fortunately, that has now changed. I've seen a lot of parents who are like, "Aapne jo karna hai, kar lo." And that's fine. Because if you're doing a degree just for the sake of it, let's say you're pushed into dentistry. And just imagine, would you ever want to go to a dentist who himself did not want to become a dentist, right? So you at least want to do something you're interested in. And once you graduate, there's no reason in the world for you to think that because I did my university degree in this, I can only do this line of work. You could do absolutely anything that you think you have sufficient skill to handle. It's by no means trying to confine you to a certain domain. It's just a starting point.
Okay. Sir, I saw on your LinkedIn profile that you were at Launch House as well. and you mentioned how okay, it's a place, a social club for a lot of people to hang out. So, what experiences from the launch house, Purdue, and your teaching experiences across Pakistan helped you launch that startup, or what key insights did you gain from those experiences?
So, launch house is basically they're not operational any longer. So it was a startup itself. They would take these, I think, mansions in LA, New York, other places, and get all the founders to come together as a residence program. Because let's say it's 50 of us all together. All 50 of us are linked to a startup. There's a lot to learn from one another, right? So build a community of people doing startups to help each other grow. The best thing about that was, because everybody else was doing one, there's a lot to learn from them. And I think for anybody who's doing a startup, to know other people who are doing startups is one of the best things that can go in their favor. Because let's say, it doesn't matter what domain you're doing, end of the day, you are going to be selling something. I'm also selling something. You have to acquire customers. I also have to acquire customers, right? If you're growing, your burn rate is going up. I'm growing, my burn rate is all going. So a lot of the things are going to be common anyway. It doesn't matter what your startup is. Again, coming to the point he made, is that the nature of the startup, is not going to be a big difference in terms of how a startup operates. End of the day, all startups operate along similar lines, but specializing obviously in different sectors, different problems. So there's a lot to share. One thing, in terms of what I learned from that, it's just basically the idea of how powerful a community can be. And that's why, again, we're trying to build a community for our startup as well, where the idea is that we want to have IGCSE, O-level, A-level students come together from around the world. Because if you have 5, 10, 20, 50,000 other students and you need help with something, for example, you go to the community, you say, hey, I've written a Common App essay. Can you guys take a look and share your thoughts? If not all the 50,000, well, at least hopefully 5 will respond, right? That's immensely valuable. So in the education sector, some common observations is that a lot of the things that I did at school are still being done today. Tech adoption is very, very low. So there's too much manual labor. I mean, if you look at the grading part or teaching part, for example, the tech tools that we have available, look at GPT, for example, or look at AI tutors. Now, if you operate, for example, the AI tutor we've built is trained on the IGCSE curriculum. Now, if you have a few questions and you give it those questions, number one, it will respond instantly. You can say, I don't get it, it will change its explanation, right? It'll keep going. You wanted to generate questions, it will do that. You wanted to explain the solution, it will do that. And it's instant. It's practically around the clock. If you think of a manual equivalent of that, it just simply cannot exist. Are you going to have somebody roaming around with you 24 hours a day? That, whenever a question comes to mind, I'll answer it. So you see, there are certain obvious advantages that it has. So when in my experience, I was observing that why are we still following the same cycle that we did when I was at school myself? How come there's no role that automation is playing? And it's not supposed to be like that. Because if you have an education model that is responsive to individual learning gaps, let's say we talk about physics. You're struggling with the topic of motion. He's struggling with the topic on electricity. And the system understands that and adapts to that to help you cover up your gaps on motion quickly and help him cover his gaps on electricity quickly. I am totally sure about it. It's an absolute game changer because it's just going to be a far more efficient model because it's impossible to do that in a manual setting. If I'm teaching and there are 25 students, which is a very common thing, right? 1 to 25. Now, how on earth am I going to give them different questions based on their strengths and weaknesses? You just cannot do it. It takes far too much time. When you bring the tech part into play, it can observe and analyze the performance of every student individually and then generate something different. And then continuously keep adapting. Then, if you look at a school or any traditional model, the more students there are, the more burden there is on the system. So what we're building, again, is the adapted model. What does it mean? As more and more students come in, we'll have more data to process. We'll have more input to give to the AI tutor and build our algorithms. So it will get even better. With a larger student body, its performance increases. Whereas in a traditional model, the performance actually decreases with student population. So you see, it's a very different take of doing it. And I think, to be honest, the only reason why I was able to come up with it is because I did. And they say, you can only connect the dots in the past. Going forward, you can never see why things are happening or what's going on. Now, when I look back, the fact that I was in engineering has a big role to play in why I was thinking of a system like this. It is a systems engineering approach. Like, for instance, you have notes, flashcards, assessments, other components, AI tutor, all coming together in a single platform. That's why we call it the ecosystem, like the learning ecosystem. And when we talk about aerospace engineering, where we said there are different domains, all of those have to come together for the system to work. This is actually similar.
So, as you mentioned, I want to talk more about this. As you mentioned, OctiLearn has an AI flashcards and all these test questions which are available for both IGCSE and A-level students. I want to know how this is different for other AIs which are available, for example, ChatGPT. For example, there's also a Flamingo AI from Khan Academy, which is very popular in the US. So I don't think it's in Pakistan yet. But what market gap are you targeting, especially in Pakistan, and how are you pitching something different from what is already in the market?
One slight adjustment is that we haven't started catering to A-level students yet, but we are definitely going to do that as we go further. With the AI tutor, one is that, you see, when you're training it, there are many different ways of training it. So whether it's Cloudmeet or any other, or even if you look at GPT, one of the biggest differentiators is that those are not specific to any curriculum. They are academic tutors. What we're building, everything is custom made for the curriculum that we're targeting. For example, whether it's the content, it's the questions, flashcards, AI tutor, anything, all of that is specifically made for IGCSE. So that means all the instructions we're giving, all the content we're using to train it, everything is relevant to the syllabus. So it operates within the confines of the syllabus. That's a big difference. If you go to GPT and give it the same prompt or use the same one on our tutor, you'll see that the responses are not the same.
Because the data sets they trained on are different.
Yes. And in terms of what is there in the market, well, I think in terms of education, even if you look at a lot of online platforms, there are video lessons and people do questions. But again, the model that's being used is still the traditional model. It cannot respond separately to separate students. Everybody's good. Basically, it's one size fits all. What we're doing, the goal is to make it adaptive, where the system is adapting to the strengths and weaknesses of every single student. For example, one of the biggest indications of that, everybody can maintain a unique version of our content. So the notes we've made, number one, we intentionally use informal language to make it very easy. They don't read like textbooks. But you can go in and create a copy of that and add and remove whatever you want. So it becomes your personal notebook. Even if we have 1 million users, all 1 million can easily maintain a unique version. Why? The logic was again the same, that if we do one comprehensive set of notes, it's not going to work well for everybody. Because again, if you were stronger at, let's say, the first 5 topics, you'd probably want the content to be more advanced. You don't want basic definitions and basic concepts. Let's say he's weak with those first 5 topics, then you'd probably prefer there to be gradual stepping, zones for him to go through to improve. So that in that case, he can retain the more basic stuff, you can remove the basic stuff. And then the same way, we're going to do the same thing with our assessments. Where if you take a test in forces, let's say with vector diagrams in forces, you're struggling with that. The next time you take a test on forces on our platform, it'll show you more questions on vector diagrams because it understands that that's something you're struggling with. Every submission, it will take into account your overall performance and then adapt to that. So the model is actually very different. And I really don't have a doubt this is a much more powerful model of helping students learn quickly. Basically, the idea, in simple words, is for our system to do all the heavy lifting. And for you just to spend time on it and do what it's saying, it will get you where you want to go. Like a really cool thing we're going to come out with in a few months is that you'll say, I have a test on, whatever topic or subject, It'll say, okay, what topics are you going to be tested on? You say this one, and that one. Okay, now how many times a week do you want to study? And then how long do you want to study for each session? You'll give it those inputs, and it'll say by what date do you wish to be ready for the exam. You'll say, well, a week earlier. It'll then generate the whole plan for you, what you need to do, and you just follow those steps. You'll be ready a week before the exam. So the planning, the structuring, all of that will be done by the system. It's meant to be a personal assistant to every student, right? Where you're strictly focusing on the actual learning part. The planning is taken away. The responsiveness is being handled by the system. How it's adapting to you is also being done behind the scenes. You don't see it.
This makes me think, won't, like, in the future, if what you're saying does happen and it grows at a rapid rate that it is growing at, won't actual teachers and actual schools be replaced by online learning? Do you think that's possible?
I don't think so. And that's definitely not something I'm trying to do either. Because I think the human component is actually very important. And even in our system, the human component is going to come into play, as in we'll bring it ourselves. So, for instance, if I'm teaching and I have 30 students, all of them are on the platform. They've taken tests, they've done their activities, whatever they had to do. Now, the system will generate analytics for me as a teacher. This is what the spread looks like. These are the areas of strength, these are the areas of weaknesses, this is what you need to focus on, and this is what you need to help them with. So then, again, I don't have to do any grading, I don't have to do any analysis. It will do all of that for me, basically what it's doing for the student, what I was just talking about. It'll do that for the teacher and equip the teacher with all of that data that's on which the teacher can take action to overcome those areas. So we're not really, I just don't think, I'm not in favor of a model like that anyway, where you completely replace the human component. The human component will remain very, very relevant. Yeah, when we talk about AGI, right, general intelligence, artificial, when we get to that stage, perhaps, I guess, it's pretty crazy. The pace of change is so much, nobody's going to be able to predict what's going to happen in 10 years, 20 years. So I don't know, that far down in the future. But as of now, we're not trying to replace the human component.
Sir, given your background in consulting, do you think one day OctiLearn may be more than IGCSE and O levels and A levels? Rather, it'll move on to consulting and helping you with your Common App and other things as well in the college admissions process.
I'm wondering how you guessed that, but yes, that's exactly what's going to happen. Because we're doing IGCSE and A level, right? And when any student who's in A level naturally is interested in applying. And I usually only have worked with students applying to the US, so that's like a core area, but as we go along, we might look at other places as well. But to start out, it's just going to be, again, the emphasis is on the US. So yeah, we're definitely going to do that, where we help them with that process. And again, bring in that support. We're actually I'm in talks with somebody where we'll announce a partnership perhaps in the coming few weeks. And we'll be doing a webinar on college counseling. And it's going to be a free event, but we'll both come on and basically talk to students about how to navigate the whole process and how we might be able to assist them. But generally, it's meant to be educational so that students who are doing it are equipped with, all the information they need to make sure they can plan accordingly. Because a lack of information, I think, really creates a lot of issues for students when they're applying. You'll see so many people, they'll say, oh, when we applied, we didn't know this or that, right? And then those are the blind spots. You have to get rid of those. If we can get rid of those, I think students themselves will be able to make much better decisions. Because, they have all the information. They're smart enough to pick what they think will work best for them. I've seen a lot of such cases, but it's important to provide that to them. So yeah, that's definitely something we'll be doing.
We've already soft launched this exclusive interview on Photon Exchange. Have you mentioned any of this anywhere else?
No.
But exclusive.
Sir, when you did your bachelor's degree and you taught in schools across Pakistan, you did counseling as well. Did you ever think that you'll get the opportunity to be on a podcast?
Especially a podcast as big as ours.
No, to be honest, I had never thought this would happen. But, you never know. There are a lot of things that you don't anticipate, but they end up happening in life. So yeah, I hadn't anticipated this.
So we encourage our audience पढ़ते रहे आगे बढ़ते रहे शायद आप भी किसी दिन
हमारी
Yeah,
podcast में
that's right.
Moving on back to the segment, we have Ronaldo or Messi.
This is very crucial. This will shape your opinion,
Ronaldo.
my opinion about you. Very good.
Verstappen or Hamilton.
Ooh, Hamilton.
Arshad Nadeem or Babar Azam.
Oh, that's so easy. Has to be Arshad Nadeem.
Now we have a would you rather question over here. Would you rather see OctiLearn become the top educational platform worldwide or lead a groundbreaking aerospace project at NASA?
And unify the four forces.
Sure.
Has to be making OctiLearn
So you would-
a big
you would-
thing in the world.
You wouldn't unify the four forces?
I'll think about it once this is done. This has to
वो
be done.
OctiLearn कर देगा ना.
This has to be done. We could, then do it.
So you would imagine
after
the
that.
implications of you unifying the four forces.
That wasn't even in the question. The question is or lead a groundbreaking aerospace project at
मैंने
NASA.
इसको mix कर दिया so to make it more convincing for
If I'm leading a ground, you see, with OctiLearn, I have a certain vision that I'm trying to implement, and it's been done from scratch. That is just a very different ballgame. I am not the founder of NASA. I can work for NASA. They're very different things. When
Okay,
you're
so-
the founder of a startup, you can implement a vision you have. It's a different story because there's no upper limit to what you could do, how great it could be, how big it could be.
So would you rather take OctiLearn to a top position or would you rather become the founder of NASA?
This is an obvious choice, sir.
Well, how it's already founded.
No, if in the
If
hypothetical.
it hadn't,
Yes. And,
Well,
and make NASA what it is.
OctiLearn देख रहे हैं by the way.
I think just because I have more relatability, probably I'd want to be the founder of OctiLearn.
Okay.
Because
Really loyal.
it's very relatable for me. It becomes a part of you when you do it.
So
for
would
so
you
long.
prefer Gauss or Euclid and Euler combined? Since you're interested in
Gauss.
I would say Gauss.
Yes. So हमारा नाम तलता है ना इसलिए मैं favorite.
Oh, that is so funny. Yeah.
Okay, कोई और question है?
नहीं. Second segment क्या?
Second segment entry is safe.
Okay. So what? Coming to like questions in the conclusion, what is your long-term vision for OctiLearn?
The long-term vision is basically I want this to be the smartest adaptive learning solution that we have in the world for the high school segment. And of course, you can then expand into other areas. It doesn't matter whether it's lower grades or higher. But the idea is, and when I say smartest, it has to be intelligent so that it is picking up on the behaviors and performance of all the students on it, and then intelligently processing that to see what is the best next step to help this person achieve his goals or to exceed them in the quickest possible time.
So what goes into making OctiLearn or like making OctiLearn what it is? Because I just said आपकी जो bachelor's है, that's in aerospace. So I wouldn't assume that you had a lot of coding experience or working with AI. So do you have people which are working on the software aspect of it, or did you contribute in that too? And if so, where did you pick up those skills?
So yeah, I definitely have people working on that, but I work with AI a lot myself. I've been using GPT very heavily. Honestly, there are very few people who use it heavily. I use it to the point where it has to send me on a break, where it says, now come back 2 hours later. Because, when I'm doing ideation and thinking about things or events or planning, I use it very heavily for a large number of things. And I'll at times give it the role of a CFO or give it the role of a CMO. And then give it all the information it needs, and then so that it starts producing contextual responses. So I'm very heavily involved in that myself. And then now I've been taking some courses on prompt engineering, and then I want to just take that up on the AI side because I'm actually I did coding in the engineering context, so we used to use MATLAB to write scripts to solve problems, but that's fundamentally, of course, similar, but it's not really building apps. So I would say I do have understanding of the fundamentals, but I'm not a coder myself. But on the AI side, I'm doing courses on the side to continuously step up because that has a key role to play in this whole thing that we're building.
So, do you think, because you're still taking courses, do you think learning is a lifelong habit that everyone should do? Or is it like bachelor's तक करनी है?
You see, majority तो ये bachelor's या graduate degree तक ही होता है. Given the mindset, it actually depends on the person. And I think not everybody has this aspect of lifelong learning. You have to instill it in yourself. But if you're keen to do it, there are ways. For example, if you keep reading, then I think what happens is that one thing or another will spark your curiosity. You have to increase, you can say, high value inputs. Now, if you're on Instagram a few hours a day, I don't know if your curiosity is going to be, sparked like that. But if you read books frequently, or you're watching, educational or really high value content, you'll probably come across things that you will find interesting. And then you're like, oh, maybe I should know a little more about it. And, you then just start to acquire more information on it. It absolutely has to be lifelong. There's no doubt about it. Because unconsciously, everybody's doing it. That's why they say, why is experience valuable? Teaches you a lot. And then, practical experience will teach you things that books can never teach you. Because the real world is the real world. So, they both have their own merits. But when you go through it, there are things that you would not have learned had you not gone through those things. But lifelong learning, definitely. If you want to really achieve something, you better have that quality in you.
So you mentioned you use ChatGPT and AI very heavily. Now the topic of AI or the subject of AI is sounds very dystopian to me. I feel like what are your thoughts on many people believe that AI will replace everything, the job displacement that it will cause and copyright stuff and it's stealing art from other people, all that stuff and the issues it will create. Do you think the benefits that AI will bring outweigh the disadvantages and the negative impact on the industry it will bring?
Well, in terms of policy, there's a long way to go. In terms of what the guiding policy should be that will regulate basically the industry. Right now, I think it's all a little foggy. There's a lot going on. There's too much happening for people to even counter it or to develop a framework for it. Because by the time they develop a framework, some key breakthrough takes place again. They're like, oh, we're still behind. We need to catch up again. So I think they're playing catch up in terms of regulation and policy framework. But as far as jobs, there are aspects to it that don't sound as positive. For example, when you look at customer service, so easily could be replaced entirely. You look at a server at a restaurant, you would easily have a robot do that, and it's a simple software application where you could have a menu and you just tap, the robot simply processes, goes in, or even if the chef is a real person, shares the instruction and then they make it ready and then they bring it out. Security guards, you could absolutely have a robot be a security guard. It's 24/7. There are a lot of things that you think are actually easy to replace and will happen probably first. But I don't think it's a cause of concern. I don't know. Just because if I look in the past, when we had the internet era start, people thought, as if the world was going to come crumbling down. But then the world probably just reshaped itself to operate in a different way than it did before the internet. I think we're probably going to see something like that.
I agree with you. That's the same example I bring up, that when the internet came, people were worried cybersecurity, hacking, we won't have any privacy. And while those issues do exist, I think overall it has brought more, let's say, good or more advantage to us as a species. I think it's a step in evolution.
Yeah, it will absolutely change the game. Look at, again, when we're talking about the education aspect, for example, if you see a profile all over your syllabus and it tells you what your ranking is in all the concepts that you need to know. Can you imagine the amount of time and effort that would take if you were to do that manually? It is very tedious. And you would probably give up. You'd be like, I cannot be bothered. And not just education, any domain. Look at medical science. when you give them scans of people who are diagnosed with certain conditions, the AI can really pick up on that and then just start looking at new scans and telling you what could go wrong.
But then, as we go on and as AI gets smarter, won't our dependence on AI get way worse too? Like, will at one point, let's say in 100 years, we'll be able to critically think for ourselves if we're just dependent on AI for everything?
I think it will dumb us down. I'm pretty sure because I can give you an example. Even what's happening today, a lot of people when they want to write an email or just a letter to someone, they'll just say, "Hey GPT, I'm sending this to this person. This is what I want to say. Give it the constraints and just produce it, and then just refine it." And when you start doing that, your own, for example, ability to write decreases, ability to think also decreases because I think, will become more and more reliant on it.
That's what we did for you.
The message we sent you was actually written by ChatGPT.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing that. Yeah. And you see, now what has that done? Had you done it manually, of course it would have helped you really think and plan and structure it together, right? Really adds value to your writing skill. But that is going to happen across so many domains. What a calculator does, for example. When people are doing math, when I was young, in O level, I'm still young, but when I was younger, so I had a habit of doing mental math. I really had a thing for it. So I didn't practice it to the point where I could do very complex calculations, but like 27 times 9, that I found was easy.
Yeah.
You do 270 minus 27 to 243.
Okay.
So 27 into 8. If it's up, minus
Yeah, नहीं उसमें फिर आप कभी add करते कभी plus. I would just keep doing that without a calculator. उससे होता क्या है? Your mental math will stay active because if you stop doing it, it really decreases. For example, if you ask somebody, just like 18 times 20, they need like 5-7 seconds to think of it. That's a very easy multiplication to do.
So I think at this point I'm so reliant on calculator. If it's like even 1 plus 1, I have to double check it just in case something's changed.
Now that is exactly what. Coming back to your point, AI is going to do the same thing. More and more outsourcing. And what are you outsourcing, by the way? Your own cognitive functions. And the better it gets, the more you're going to ask it to do, the less your own mind is going to do. You can imagine what's going to happen.
Have you seen WALL-E?
No.
It's just a dystopian world where all the humans are just like these fat blobs of people that just can't even stand anymore.
Yeah.
They just sit and they do everything.
It is a little strange. I do think it's kind of strange. I think it's going to go too far, to be honest.
Okay, sir, so let's make a pact that 20 years later, AI will take this interview. We'll repeat this again, and we'll have AI take it.
Oh,
with you.
Not 20. Remove the 0 from it.
Sir, come on. 2 years is...
I'm telling you, easily. Let GPT-5 come out, and then they're also adding the voice capability to it.
I think even ChatGPT
They've already demoed it.
No,
they've already demoed it. Did you not see that?
That was ChatGPT 4, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
two-way.
voice ke saath with the
It
screen.
can easily do that.
It can easily do it.
And then you can have a humanoid do it. They've demoed humanoids as well. Human-like robots. 20 years, you see, what is happening is that it's basically just a simple exponential graph. Whatever change used to take place over this amount of time, now 10 times the change is going to take 10 times less.
The time.
Yeah.
Scary.
So the change of pace is going to be, and by the way, they're talking about it these days where people don't know what to suggest people to study because it's just so drastic and it's changing. It's got such a significant impact on so many things that people are having trouble designing study paths for students.
Because everything is
because it's no longer that structured. Every few years the game is changing, and then what you can rely on, again, just if you have to be rock solid fundamentally.
It feels like every year my dad is saying a different thing. 4 साल पहले बेटा computer scientist बन जाओ बहुत scope है. अब बेटा artificial intelligence में जाओ बहुत scope है.
Definitely, that has always been happening. But you see, again, if अगर आप critical thinking, you're good at that. You're a good problem solver. Open-ended problem solving बहुत difficult होती है. Because again, a lot of variables, a lot of correct solutions. One better than the other in some way, but the other one better than the previous one in another way. So then that is where optimization comes in. You have to consider trade-offs. So those are things. If you're good at those, you have to be adaptable, basically. And again, why was I so keen to build a learning ecosystem that is adaptive, so that it's evolving? And that's exactly the point, that the traditional model doesn't evolve, it's static. If you, even as a person, can adapt and evolve continuously, you'll do fine. It doesn't matter what changes take place.
So I've noticed you articulate your argument very well. Did you do debates or anything in the past?
No, I didn't do it. When I was in O level, I still remember the person's name. He wanted me to be part of the debating team. So he was like, "Tumne zarur aana hai summer camp mein." I was like, "Sir, time kya hoga?" 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. मैंने कहा फिर तो भूल जाए. I just didn't go. And then summer break with 9 to 4. But then I thought I should have done it. But I guess
It worked out well in the end.
it probably comes out of practice, I would say. And then when you're teaching, you have to be a good speaker. The better you can speak, obviously, the easier it's going to be to inspire people. This is why all the students I interact with, I keep telling them, if you have all the grades in the world, but you're not a strong speaker, you're working against yourself. It is absolutely worth investing time and effort into it, because if you can speak well, you'll get people to listen to you. You can inspire a lot of people as well. And when you can inspire people, you'll see a lot of things can happen. So if you cannot speak well on the other side, you might be a very skillful person. And you're playing a role. Let's say you work at a good company, you have a great role, but you're working within certain bounds. Now, you're not going to get more and more prominent unless you can get people to listen to you, right? Why would they want you to lead them when you cannot even sort of talk them into ideas and things? So it's pretty much a non-negotiable skill. And given that it's not very common, it's all the more reason to be good at it, because then you're part of a small group of people. So the edge is there.
The last segment is called Agree or Disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, did you before we just you gave us the answers and stuff, but this time you should elaborate a bit on why you think or why you agree or disagree with this.
And then we can debate on it. So we'll see if the lessons you missed out really did help or not.
You okay?
Sure.
So our first is, ये तो इसकी हमने कर लिया है.
Second से कर लो.
Second से करते हैं. Humans will colonize Mars within the next 50 years.
Next 50. Oh.
Let's say 50 to 100.
I think this shorter time would be.
Yeah. 50. Well, that's tricky. Given how things are going, it's just so hard to think down the road like that. But I could probably break it down into decades. I doubt it. I think it'll take longer.
I think it will probably take longer.
Theoretically, it all sounds good, but if you look at the practicality of it, it's not gonna, because you first take 10, 50, maybe 100, 500 people. They have to stay there many, many years for certain basic systems to be in place. Then you put the basic systems in place. You send another 10,000 people, right? Colonizing is a big deal. And the competition at ARSSDC?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, everybody's designing space settlement stuff there. So it seems very doable. Like, oh, ye cheez aise hogi, and you're doing, but then practically executing that is a different story. I think it's going to take longer.
So Elon Musk himself said that an interviewer asked him that isn't it just for this colonization of Mars, just for rich people to go and have a vacation there. But he himself said in the first 100 years, it's going to be difficult because the people themselves will have to work actively to ensure their survival and of those around them. Because जो भी colonies बढ़ेंगी, we don't have the desirable living conditions there. So you need to foster relationships in a way and do work that is collaborative enough कि सब survive कर लें. Which I think will be a very major setback, because if you try to move an entire population there, disagreements are bound to happen. And at a very large scale as well.
You see,
especially with governments as well.
If you look at foundational systems, it's the public administration, healthcare, education, security, all of that. It's just a very slow, painful process. And then taking all of that there, it has to take longer.
I think it'll be harder to take 10,000 people to Mars than what if just 100 people in Mars, and then obviously after a few years, those 100 people will be like 1,000, and then like a new species.
You see, even if you take, it's really not about the number as much, it's about sustainability. Even if you take 100, let's say, the thing is, are they surviving there and can they live in comfortable conditions? That trial on its own is going to take a long time.
But like you're an aerospace engineer, so you would know. But do we even have the technology or the resources to even take even 50 people or 100 people to Mars safely?
Well, not at the moment. But you see, what happens is that there have been a lot of times in history where people have thought certain things to be impossible, but they've happened. Now, when you talk about AI, for example, you talk about quantum computing, the cost of processors going down and computing power becoming cheap. It's going to be probably unlike anything we've seen, because when you combine AI with quantum computers and processing power of that capacity, it's a very explosive combination. The pace of change is just dizzying, actually. It will become even crazier when that happens, when quantum computing becomes the norm.
Okay, sir. Sir, do you think ethics are essentially opposing scientific development?
Posing?
Like
Well,
ethics, as in
I think, what I would say is that when you look at different applications, the question of ethics comes into play, and then some certain people will say that doing a particular thing is within ethical practice. Some people will say it's not. So that again is a very subjective thing. Depends on what kind of application we're talking about.
So, say for example, if you have a prisoner and he's on a death sentence, so you just take that body, you examine the brain, you open up the brain, and you can do it for a large amount of people. So now every neuroscientist has a body to look at, and different bodies as well. So wouldn't that foster scientific growth, and by a huge amount?
You're talking about once a person has died, right?
Yes.
or if it's on a death
That's one
sentence.
aspect of violating ethics.
Well, the thing is, then you generally take consent from the individual when they're alive as to whether you can
Just
use.
disregard that.
Yeah.
If science,
You just start doing it on your own. So you have a person.
There's no ethical system in place.
Okay, so a
That
person has
boosts
died,
science.
and we've started using their parts and organs to
Yes.
study
Study
them.
the human.
I don't think that is. It's. I think it sets a bad precedent, because just because the way I would think of it is that, well, that person's body is his or her own belonging, right? Now, even if the person has died, it's not suddenly become my body, right? It's still that person's body, but the person is no longer alive. So without that person consenting, it is not. It's not.
Well, then that's a
I wouldn't
matter
say
of
it's
ethics now. If
Yeah.
they were no longer in place, wouldn't that just undoubtedly boost scientific
Oh,
development?
yeah, if they're not in place, well, yeah, clearly.
So
What
the-
about-
Because the more, in any case, the more samples you have to look at, the more you're going to
There's
learn,
also
the
the
better it's going to
example
be.
of like human testing and animal testing,
Yeah,
testing like
yeah,
pharmaceutical
yeah,
products
yeah.
on.
if you can do that on humans straight away, and humans, for example, if a medicine has a side effect that a person may die, and the person is already on death row and is on.
So you want to give them the medicine?
Yes, so because the benefits will outweigh the disadvantages.
Well, I personally would not. I would not be comfortable with doing that, because in
Even
my
to prisoners who've killed thousands of people.
Thousands of people. Hitler लेकर आ गया.
well, you see now, problem क्या होता है? Vigilantism is dangerous. Number one, you need a system in place, and that's why courts exist, right? There has to be a trial. It has to be proven. Once it is proven, then some people say, oh, the judgment isn't, not sound. The judgment, some people will say, is sound, but there at least has to be a system. If you start looking at an individual level like that, things get out of hand very quickly.
Say, like, for example, we have everything on video. For example, Gauss tries to, murder me. For example,
Who wants to?
Gauss tries to murder me.
Okay.
Right? And he is successful in that, for example. So yeah. So now we have this video. So you take the camera.
If I try to murder you, I would be successful.
So you take it to a court and you show them the evidence, and obviously he's guilty. You've seen it, you're an eyewitness, and the court has a video of it. So yeah, so now that this person is responsible for killing another person, right?
Right.
Why wouldn't he be? And he's obviously on death row, right? So why wouldn't he be subject? Shouldn't he be subject to medicines that may kill him? But if they do not kill him, they make strides in the scientific community. So you have a medicine which cures cancer but may kill you,
I see the point. You're saying that if he's committed that crime,
and we know.
then
it.
we'll use him for greater good.
Yes.
Right?
So because imagine the number of lives we've saved.
So I've already told my parents when I die, they can donate my body
I
for
don't
science.
think Islam के अंदर हो सकता है. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. Like,
I
thought
think
it was
ye is a very nuanced topic. Now, when people say कि Islam में ये चीज़ की जात है या नहीं है, you need somebody who has immense domain specific expertise. Somebody probably who's in medical science but also has really in-depth information on fundamentals, principles, and then jurisprudence, Islamic regulation. It's hard to say. I don't know, I could be wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, I think there seems to be a difference in opinion, and that does happen on things such as this one, because it's tricky. It's not very easy to say. हम लोग out of probably because generally speaking, people tend to be naive. जो ज़हन में आता है कह देते हैं. But when you actually think of it, a person like you or me or him, it's beyond our skill set to even remotely say ठीक है या नहीं ठीक. The thing is that I think opinions are overhyped. One thing that we need to understand, or you also need to understand, is that every person's opinion has a different weight, right? That everybody will agree on. Now that opinion, how is it going to be factored? Meaning, usko kitni weightage deni hai? That depends on what?
expertise.
There you go. But the problem is, in today's time, everybody apparently is an expert on everything. You see, then you just have a lot of noise. And एक signal to noise ratio होता है electronics के अंदर भी. So ये जो signal to noise ratio in terms of opinions भी है ना, it's important to filter that out. Whose opinion is meaningful, whose opinion is simply कि मुझे ऐसा लगता है. किसी आपको कैसा लगता है उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. आपको पहले उसके किसी basis के ऊपर आपको कुछ लगना चाहिए ना. And the whole idea of logic and reason and rationale is that. Because अगर आप और मैं दोनों ही logic से हट जाएंगे ना, आपको कि मुझे ऐसा लगता है, मैं कहूँगा मुझे ऐसा लगता है, तो फिर हम लगे रहेंगे अगले 10 साल. Because किसी न किसी guiding post के according तो चलेंगे तो कुछ resolution होएगा ना. And your best friend is to go with sound logic.
So मुझे ऐसा लगता है हमें next question में move on करना चाहिए.
Yeah.
IQ testing is an effective measure of a student's ability.
No, I don't think so. I think IQ testing probably still has a long way to go, or testing somebody's intelligence. You'll have so many different types of tests. Why do they exist? Clearly because the people who are designing those tests are not in agreement in what the best way to test it is. So you'll probably see, life requires a lot of, I'd say, the word slipping my mind, abstract qualities. For instance, everybody has heard of grit, persistence. Again, if you look at this guy, Arshad, now with almost zero resource, no money to fund his pursuit, probably living in very difficult conditions, right? But still to have the resolve to continue doing what he wanted to do, believing that one day he will get to a certain stage. There are very few people. You'll see a lot of the problem is that intelligence is overrated. From what I felt, it's more than intelligence. It's about how far you can go when conditions are against you. Because most people tend to run away. And it's easier said than done. It's a long, hard toil. Again, when you look at startups, for example, there's a lot of glamour associated with them, but they're extremely hard behind the scenes. They really test you. And with so many things that are uncertain and not knowing what's going to happen, of course you're working because you have faith in it and you're going for it. But a lot of people will not go down that route. Why? Because they want security. Operating in uncertain conditions is not everybody's cup of tea. So I don't think, and even otherwise, IQ tests, even if we look at intelligence, I just don't think it's. How do you test somebody's artistic intelligence, for example?
Sir, talking about Arshad Nadeem, in the Olympics, were you supporting Pakistan or Kenya?
Well, I obviously have a much deeper connection to Pakistan because this is where I've lived most of my life. पहली बात तो मुझे उर्दू आती है लेकिन मुझे स्वेली नहीं आती. And अगर आती भी होती तो by ethnicity I'm Pakistani, right? So the relatability aspect obviously वो इधर ज़्यादा है. But that Kenya, interesting जब लोगों को कहते हैं ना उनको लगता है शायद 2-3 साल रह के आगे होंगे और आदत होती है और मैं वहाँ से आया. But it actually goes back a long way, like I told you earlier. So definitely, yeah, I was supporting Pakistan, but you can support both.
Yes, because Pakistan.
I mean, it's अगर कोई Kenya से जीता, yeah, you're fine, but because I'm not really there, haven't lived there for a long time, it gets more and more distant.
So, what's your favorite African country apart from Kenya?
That's the only one I've been to.
Sir, don't you?
In
have
Africa.
Oh, yes.
That's the only one in Africa that I've been to.
Sir, don't you have a working understanding of geopolitics and every other aspect?
Favorite in what sense? Like, is it touristic?
I associate with this country. I like this country. So, for example,
I think I like Kenya the most because वहाँ पे giraffes होते हैं.
मैं Kenya को ही कहूँगा because I've spent really good times there.
I like Eritrea.
फिर तो मेरे लिए obvious choice है ना. I've spent time there, with the natural connection.
Oh,
apart. I would say Egypt.
Sir, I like Eritrea because सबसे ज़्यादा censored वो है. So I can do anything and no one will know. Sir, should we move on? This is the last question, sir.
Okay.
Education system should prioritize STEM subjects over humanities.
Oh. Well, not really. I wouldn't say that because when people are talking about STEM, you see now this concept of STEAM.
Yes.
Right? It's critical because if you have a very sort of science-oriented mind, you always think in terms of science, I think you'll miss out on a lot in life because, again, when you look at the arts, when you look at language, now, the art of telling a story, right? Some people are great storytellers. Again, when you look at movies or you look at people who do script writing and are really great at it or writing novels, doing it really well. How do you do that as a science person? You cannot do that. And I don't think people have ever, usually products, ideas, things are coming into play. Let's say the iPhone came out, people perhaps were inspired by the design or the idea. But if you look at it, I think most of the times, inspiration is from person to person. People will inspire you. You don't look at a car and be like, oh, I am so inspired, right? That, again, falls in the domain of what? Communicating, right? Speaking to people, telling them what you've done, telling them about your journey, your story, and then people saying, oh, wow, I'd also really like to do that. So you cannot, I don't think you should but yeah, because all of the developments in the modern day, of course, are related to STEM, there is importance, but it should be prioritized in the sense that everybody, to increase access to people who want to do STEM, for the platform to be there, but those who are more inclined to go towards humanities. When you talk about, for example, politics or political science, you see that's a different ballgame. But if your political environment is very refined, sophisticated, then the entire community, again, is also going to benefit. So the different types of benefits they bring into picture. I wouldn't say you should prioritize one over the other, but improving access and accessibility, making sure everybody has a platform. So that is developed to the point where whoever wants to do STEM, and of course you educate them, and you increase the proportion of people going into STEM. That's something I would definitely do.
Say, if you were the education minister of Pakistan, what would be the first thing you do?
First thing. First thing.
Do you think the thing you think is very essential and must be changed or added into the system?
It's how to think.
So, how would you implement that?
Well, how you implement that is, let's say there are 8 lessons in a day, right? So you don't have to do it every day. You could have a couple of slots throughout the week where you're basically trying to help everybody understand what logic is, again, how is knowledge acquired, what are sound questions to ask, how do you objectively evaluate ideas, right? That, I think, is going to be a superpower. Everything else is secondary, whether science, math, engineering, this, that, whatever. If you're a good thinker, if you're a good objective thinker, you can handle everything else.
Sir,
Why? Because once you have reasoning ability, तो फिर you'll be able to reason your way through everything, and it's pretty much game on then.
सर जब आप एजुकेशन मिनिस्टर बन जाएंगे फिर तो फिर will you come on our podcast again?
मैं आ जाऊंगा, लेकिन मैं उस साइड पे नहीं, मैं प्राइवेट साइड पे ठीक हूँ.
So let's say
Because you see,
if you did get an opportunity,
yeah,
would you do it? Like, for example, Abhi Shivashi Bhatta, and he's like, sir, would you like to become the education minister?
Well,
शिवाशी भी decide करेगा.
Even if we go into a hypothetical situation and let's say I have the option. Again, the startup is something I've built from a blank piece of paper. I'm not going to give that up to pursue a different role.
Speaking on startup, tell us more about Shark Tank Pakistan.
Let's leave that for later.
Sir, I think before ending the podcast, we have to see what will make you give up OctiLearn. Sir, $2 billion is OctiLearn.
So $2 billion, all the happiness in the world, everything you ever wanted except OctiLearn, to give up OctiLearn.
I will say OctiLearn. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Yes, if you give me a large sum of money, ये जो free की चीजें होती है ना, they don't have that essence in them. When you've built something yourself, आपको 100 billion भी आ जाए, ठीक है, आप 6 महीने, 9 महीने, 12 महीने, you'll have all the fun in the world, but you'll get sick of it very quickly. It's human nature, right? Doesn't matter what you're doing. Apparently, for a year or so, people will think, okay, fine, great. It depends on the person as well. But if you've gone through a certain journey and you've built something significant out of nothing, that cannot be replaced with money. Achievement cannot be bought, in simple words.
Chalo, sir, I'm glad you chose OctiLearn. मेरे पास असल में $2 billion नहीं थे.
Sir, anything that you would take over OctiLearn. So anything
Sir,
that you...
$10 billion लेके ना एक और स्टार्टअप शुरू करे, उसको कहते हैं OctiLearning. नाम चेंज करते हैं.
I see the point. Well, anything. आप लोग बहुत कोशिश कर रहे हो कि मैं ये कह दूँ, I would give it up.
Sir, I'm trying to challenge your loyalty.
No, I'm just, I don't see a reason as to why.
skip कर देंगे कार्ड देंगे.
You see, because all of that, it's been hard. मैं आपको ये guarantee से बता सकता हूँ. It's way harder than I thought it was going to be, and it's really tested me in multiple domains. There are times when, because again, time, resource, and capital. ये तीनों बहुत लगते हैं startup को एक point पे ले जाने के लिए. And there have been occasions where I wasn't sure how I was going to solve certain problems, but I just thought there's no way I'm turning back. I have to do it. So when you keep moving, of course, after a certain point, luck will tend to open a few doors to you, but you have to knock perhaps hundreds of them. Do you have the patience and the resolve to knock 100 of them? That's the question. So the problem is, when you've put your heart and soul into something, and out of absolutely nothing, you see, look at the name. I borrowed it from the octopus. It's a very intelligent creature, has adaptive mechanisms. So what we're building is similar. If you look at the logo, the branding, everything, I was actually involved in it, right? And all of it was done through conscious effort. But not just casually saying, oh, that logo looks fine. Look at 10 and pick one. We designed it from scratch. So you see, if you think of giving it up, what the first thing that comes to your mind is that, okay, all that time, all of that, effort that has gone into it, and so much energy you've invested, whether that's emotionally, psychologically, mentally, in every domain, it all goes to what? You see? If you end up where it fails, that's a different story. Then you're like, well, I've exhausted myself, I've done everything I could, and that's the nature of the beast. That's why they're high risk, high reward. But quitting it is different. And when you quit things, the regret doesn't really let you live. You know why? Because probably if people quit, then I'm sure most of them later in life start thinking, okay, what if we had pushed just a little further? Would things have changed? Then that can drive you nuts.
So it's essentially a child.
Yes. Not really, I wouldn't say child.
So
I think that's a bit of an overstatement.
So you just.
I think most parents, when they have a child, you tell them, "Aapko dono mein se kaun sa choose karna hai?" Is going to be the child.
No, but I think if you have a child and I ask you a question in 20 years, your child is okay, you think like for 5 minutes before making.
To be honest, they do have similarities. In the sense that when you have a child and it's a baby, takes
That's what I'm saying.
Takes a lot of energy for people to bring up a child. And I think it's probably, as of now, the only thing I think is harder than building a startup is bringing up a child, actually. So, they are similar like that. You have to, and then, how they will turn out to be when they're older, you don't know.
So
Life is just, you see, even that's a gamble. But you still invest all of that you've got into your children. Same thing with a startup. You don't know what's going to happen. But obviously, you're going on certain indicators and having faith in it.
So if OctiLearn is your child, so are you an octopus or your significant other?
Perhaps I am.
So that leads me to my most important question. So octopus has 3 hearts, right?
Multiple, yeah.
Yeah. So एक heart तो आप हो गए ना OctiLearn के, तो अब 2 available है और हम 2 भी है, ठीक है. तो what if sir 40% share हमें दे दे आप, ठीक है, 60% आप रखे OctiLearn का, and then we just lead OctiLearn together, make it into a.
Sir, I think it's time to break it to you. This was just a setup for demanding our share in OctiLearn.
Well, पहला stage तो वैसे भी होता है involvement का. Share तो बहुत आगे की बात होती है. But yeah, I mean, like the internship we have going on, because I've always felt since day one. You see, for any startup in the world to succeed, it better pay attention to what the users are saying. You cannot run it like a traditional business. हम तो ऐसे करते हैं, आपने आना है तो आ जाए. At times, you see businesses still being able to function. Maybe they sell great food, customer service isn't that good, but it's going. If you want to build a really game-changing startup that has to scale, you better, and you have no choice. You have to listen to what the users say, constantly adapt. So having the students involved, I've actually had them involved even before we onboarded our first user. I'd always ask them what they think, get them to share a lot of feedback, and very sort of segmented feedback in the sense of what about this, what about that, what about this feature. The whole thing. What about the content? What about our style? To see what the actual take or perception is, and then build around that. So once they're involved, like a lot of people ask that, okay, at the end of the internship, can we be involved after that as well? So I told them, yes, you can. But obviously, that will have to be a little more selective in that. At this time, if we start working with 20 more people, it takes a lot of time. You have to teach them what's going on, help them acquire skills so that they're doing valuable work. But as they go along, in a startup, to be honest, all key people do have equity.
So on the topic of students, I was made aware by Goss that he's still on the waiting list for the OctiLearn AI.
So I'll tell you exactly why. We can end that in just one day. The challenge is that now we're building an ecosystem, right? So as of now, it's nodes, flashcards, assessments, performance analytics, simulations, AI tutor, all of that in one place. Now, we don't have the content ready for A-level. So we cannot offer the whole ecosystem to A-level. If I could, we'd actually do it simultaneously. I really want to. There are a lot of other people on the A-level waitlist. But the AI tutor can be made available to A-level students. I've been thinking hard about it. So you see, you have to focus on a narrow market first, really nail it, and then you can scale to whatever point you want. So I was thinking, well, if I go really broad like that, catering to IGCSE, then also A-level, with very limited resources, we might get over-constrained. and then you have a half-baked thing for IG and half-baked for the other. So then I thought, okay, maybe let's just do something that works extremely well for one, then adding the other is not a problem. But we can onboard students and let them use the AI tutor easily. And I actually was thinking about doing that. The only reason why I kind of delayed it, I thought, well, when students come in, you see, when you come in and see the AI tutor, you'll think that's all the app does. But that's not true. So it's tricky like that. But what do you think? If you can only use the AI tutor, would you use it regularly?
Used the AI tutor for most of my exams, for like the A-level exams, and even NSTC.
Which one?
OctiLearn ka ye.
Oh, acha.
Even for understanding, because Nashma we had a project, right?
Yeah.
Regarding the Bernoulli's principle, वगैरह. So I searched up the Bernoulli's principle on there. It actually gave a very.
So I tried to use it, लेकिन मैं waitlist हो गया, तो मैंने उस Zephyr को बोला मैंने भी use करने मुझे अपना
account share किया था मैंने.
फिर वो भी नहीं हुआ था.
Well,
हाँ, क्योंकि वो खराब हो गया था, सर ने फिर मुझे सही कह दिया था.
I think उस केस में probably एक week, ये जो next week है उसके बाद, I guess we can let all the A-level people come in.
So you should also put like a poll on the vote to ask people if they would use the website just for the AI or not.
Yeah, we're doing that with the community. We have, I don't know, about more than 400 people. And then now we're using Discord as well.
Yes.
I want the community to be in Discord, to be honest.
So
But it looks like a lot of people avoid using Discord.
Yeah, it's true.
So they're just happy
Especially
staying on
Pakistan.
WhatsApp. But the problem is that as a discussion forum, Discord is so much more powerful.
Very true.
That's why I keep trying to move people there. On WhatsApp, general chat is fine. But you know, as a discussion forum where academic support is going back and forth, just doesn't work well. But now that we have more people, the community has grown even on Discord, you see, again, the students have a key role to play in it. The community is supposed to be student-led. So I have 2 students right now, one is in undergrad, one is in A-level. They're looking after the community. Because when I remove myself from the picture, students all of a sudden start engaging more. You know, because they feel more comfortable with other students. So then I thought, okay, let me remove myself from the picture, because when I meet them on Zoom, they're not very talkative. When a student ambassador meets them, because she's told me, she's been working with me for 2 years, that, you know, they have a lot of insight to share. हमें ये हमारा ये ख्याल है, you know, इसके बारे में उसके बारे में. They're very vocal, and that's the goal, to get them to talk. So I was like, okay, fine, then I'll skip that, and you guys can do the moderation.
So a lot of people associate Discord with this gaming chat only and not like a community.
I think that's a local issue, not outside of Pakistan, because there are tons of large communities on Discord.
Yes,
It's been a
even for
while
math
now
and science.
since it expanded outside of gaming. What बहुत शुरू में यार was for gaming, but now you've got really big 35, 50,000, 150,000, several 100,000 people as well in a single community. It works great, but the whole concept of discussion forums is, abhi bhi Pakistan mein is, I think, really slow compared to many other places. For example, Reddit, I think they have the best community in the world.
I do think so.
The kind of feedback, suggestions, experiences people share, I've never seen that quality anywhere else.
But I do think it has its downsides as well.
Yeah.
Okay, like what?
I would let Gauss elaborate on that.
I mean, Reddit, like, we have to see what kind of demographic uses what kind of platform, right? I think WhatsApp, people, like, usually associate with business. Discord, like, games and stuff. And I think Reddit, there are a lot of trolls too.
Yes.
Like,
so basically, the opinions that people are offering might be just because, you know, to troll or to deceive the other person or to lead them on a different
but
path.
obviously, if it's well moderated and well regulated,
Yeah.
those should not be.
Depends on the subreddit.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, what I'm saying is that, for example, if you go and say I'm moving to a new country, you know, and ask for support, I've seen very high quality responses from people.
Especially IGCSE ke jo subreddits, and they offer like a lot of resources in their boards as well.
A lot of people found us on the IGCSE subreddits.
So what's like, if anyone's watching and they want to join like OctiLearn or like join the Discord community, how can they? How can they find and how can
So
they
if they
apply?
just go to the website on OctiLearn.com and sign up, we send them the onboarding email we send has, even in the waitlist form that they sign up and asks you, do you want to be a part of the WhatsApp community? And then if somebody says no, of course we don't add them. They can say yes, we bring them in directly. But then that email also has a link to the Discord community.
Okay.
Everyone, download OctiLearn abhi.
Yep.
So I think that's it.
I
Okay.
think काफी time हो गया, sir. I think this was way better than
We anticipated.
Thank you everyone for
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode.